I'm Chris Avina with another episode of American Outdoor News, and today we have the Dallas Safari Club's Director of Government Affairs, Erica Tergeson. Erica, thank you so much for joining us today.
You bet. Happy to be here, and thanks so much for having me.
Now, political action, people don't think about, oh, you got conservation groups involved in political action, but what we do is very political.
Yeah, 100%. It's super political. Um, Even if you look at the way that our fish and game is managed, all the people involved there are political appointees or, run for election at some point. So if you don't think that there's politics in all of that and endangered species, then you're absolutely wrong because it's everywhere.
Now, what are the biggest challenges that face hunters and conservationists today?
Yeah, for me, the thing that keeps me up at night is that we're only one kind of international incident away from seeing proposed hunting bans. And it doesn't matter which side of the aisle is necessarily in power. And I hate to bring it back up, but we go back to the Cecil the Lion incident, right?
Yeah,
That the facts didn't matter. What mattered was what happened online, social media after that. It created this huge firestorm. Congress tried to pass bills on hunting bans, whether or not they had anything to do with the facts of that incident
yeah,
alone, because they really didn't.
yeah,
But you see this knee-jerk reaction. And let's be honest, when something bad happens, a lot of times we look at Congress and say, well, aren't you going to do something? Pass a law and make sure this doesn't happen again. And there's already laws on the books for all of these things, as
yeah.
hunters are very aware of. I mean, if you violate those laws, if you don't have a hunting license, if you buy the wrong hunting license, you can get in some really, really big trouble. But
Sure.
when these are sensationalized, that's when bad things happen and when common sense isn't very common. So
Well,
that is my number one fear.
well, first off, um, Dallas Safari Club has that um, stigma that,
Mhm.
it's A, just Dallas, and B, just safaris.
Mhm.
DSC is
Yeah.
involved and you're involved as much in North America as we are overseas. And we have our own
Yeah,
challenges here.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have more DSC members outside of the Texas than in the state of Texas. And the other thing, our chapter system, which has grown almost exponentially, our chapters spend money locally on local projects in North America. So yes, we do have a foundation that gives an awful lot of money and philanthropy to Africa and other places, but we also have do a great deal and spend a great deal of money here domestically.
Yeah, I had been on the board of the Northeast chapter of Dallas Safari Club for about 6 years. So we actually did a lot locally, sponsoring local non-for-profits, youth education, things of that nature. But why is a political action committee so important to what we do, to our way of life?
Yeah, and that is such a great question because a lot of people don't even know what a political action committee is. So, in the law, it's called a political action committee. The only thing, otherwise known as a PAC, so you hear about PACs and you hear about all the money in politics.
Yeah,
What this is it's set up to support candidates. So, members of DSC can give money to the DSC PAC, and then we have a PAC board and we decide which federal candidates are supported by our PAC. So, for example, we have a lot of amazing members of Congress that are hunters that have hunted internationally and they defend us in Congress. So, we want to be sure that they can get reelected. So, we
yeah,
give them money through the DSC PAC. but that's the only thing that the PAC does. It doesn't pay for my salary. It doesn't pay for anything else except for political donations. And the other thing that's kind of difficult about a PAC is that each person, and you have to be a member of DSC to give to it because of the type of PAC we are, but each person can give a maximum of $5,000 a year. So where we have a lot of big donors and folks might think, okay, the very wealthy members of DSC can just write a big check to the PAC, right? Well, that doesn't exist here because
Yeah.
everybody's capped. So that's why everything from $50 up to $5,000 really helps with the PAC.
Now, what policy changes are on the horizon that will significantly impact um, hunting, conservation, firearms? I know we're seeing new things every day.
Yeah.
Which
I'll probably start. That's a big question.
it is.
Um, but I'll probably start with everything we're seeing in the administration right now. And we are seeing they're trying to downsize government quite a bit. And we don't know what type of impact that's going to have yet. I think we all know that there is fat to trim there, and that that government can certainly be more efficient.
Mhm.
But we're waiting to see what the impacts of that'll be. And that's why I'm here in DC working to make sure we are becoming more efficient, instead of permits not being issued, those type of things. So that's going to have some impact on us. Otherwise, I think this current Congress and this administration are extremely pro hunting, pro use of public lands, and pro firearms for that matter.
Yeah.
Um, I think, in fact, they even just, and I used to work for NRA, but I'm not, in the know on all of the firearms stuff these days. But they're talking about waiving the fees for suppressors, for
Right.
example. So I do think they're going to do a lot of things to make access to firearms and ammunition maybe a little easier.
Yeah, I think even the suppressor side is going to be easier to obtain, even in my state, in New York.
Yeah,
It's going
yeah.
to become a lot easier than it has been in the past.
Hmm.
Now, I
Yeah.
know,
No, I was talking to friends about it the other day, and we even said, wow, I remember it was, a 9-month minimum wait to get a suppressor.
yeah,
And now I had a friend, he said he got his in 2 weeks approved. So it's just incredible how that whole process has changed.
amazing. Now,
Yeah.
I know one of the big things that is in the news and people are debating and fighting about is the reintroduction of the wolf.
Hmm.
I know Congressman Tom Tiffany and Congresswoman Lauren Boebert have co-sponsored a bill to delist the wolf from the endangered species list. Let's face it, um,
Yeah.
they're apex predators. They multiply exponentially, and they're a danger. They're a danger
Yeah.
to wildlife. They're a danger to farmers' livelihood, livestock, pets, and whatnot. It's not the cute, cuddly animal that the left makes it out to be.
No, absolutely not. I'm from Colorado, where, as you know, in the last election cycle, they voted for, with less than 1% approval, to reintroduce wolves there. Well, these are not the wolves that were originally in Colorado. And
Yep.
as we all know, it's documented that wolves were already making their way south into Colorado. So why not just let the natural migration take place? And then in the lake states, if you look at the wolf ratios there, and and I can't remember the specific numbers, but the levels of
They're
recovery,
high.
they have so far exceeded that, and it is really impacting people in rural areas.
Yeah.
And even under the Biden administration, the Fish and Wildlife Service tried to delist those wolves and were unable to because of litigation. And the case law on wolves is really the big problem, which is why Congress has to act. Because if you litigate on wolves, you basically lose. So it's a real problem. I do think there's a chance that we can get some reform in this Congress. There's also a big Endangered Species Act bill that was introduced by Chairman Westerman of Arkansas. He's the chairman of the Natural Resources Committee, and he has a whole list of amendments to the Endangered Species Act because it doesn't work if you list a species and then you can never take it off when
Yeah,
it's clearly recovered. Grizzly bears is another great example.
it is. It is. And, it should be regulated by state, like every other species.
Absolutely.
The
Hmm.
numbers are going to vary from state to state. They have to be controlled. I know ranchers in Colorado that have to hire
Yeah.
extra hands to drive around their property at night to protect their livestock.
Yeah,
It's
absolutely. Yeah,
it,
the stories are very sad.
it's not sustainable financially for
No.
these ranchers. And what are we going to do? Import more beef or lamb or uh, other types of produce?
Yeah, and the other problem that people don't realize too is just the stress that it causes the animals. So it's the weight that wasn't gained, or it's them getting sick because they know they're being watched by wolves.
Sure.
And that causes a lot of stress on all of the animals and all wildlife and, domestic livestock.
Well, here's a flip side of that coin. They just um, re I don't even know what to call it, regenerated uh, a dead 3,000-year-old extinct species of wolf, the dire wolf.
Hmm.
Why?
I know. I'm with you on that. I don't like playing God, and I don't think it's a good idea.
And that they're going to release those into the wild? They're almost three times the size of a regular wolf. And, you know, wolves are killing machines and they kill for sport, not just to eat.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's been documented. No, the direwolf thing is kind of scary. They were talking about I think a couple of years ago it was the woolly mammoth too,
Yeah,
trying to bring it back, and it really is kind of a Jurassic Park scenario. So just because you can do it, should you ethically do it? And then what do you do with those animals? It's pretty disturbing. Some things do go extinct for a reason, you
yeah.
know?
Well,
And maybe we should just let well enough alone.
it didn't work out so good in the movie. So,
No.
so now I know Trump is a big supporter of conservation and allowing us to use um, federal lands and things of that nature, where the left is big on preservation. What is
Hmm.
the difference between preservation and conservation?
Hmm. This is something I've worked on my entire career, so I love this question. So when you think of preservation, what I think of are our national parks that were truly set aside. Some national parks do allow hunting. It depends on their organic acts when they were created. Most do not. But those are areas that were set aside to truly be preserved as is, whereas conservation is this sustainable use of the resources that we have to help them in perpetuity. And all, hunters understand that concept quite well. But we have seen on other federal lands, like the Forest Service, like Bureau of Land Management, that there, in the last administration, there were a lot of national monument designations, for example, or even things that are called wilderness study areas. They are treated as de facto wilderness
Mhm.
meaning preservation. You're not allowed to ever build a road or a trail. You can't even use a mechanized vehicle. So, like, you can't use a bicycle, for example, in
Yeah,
wilderness areas. You're not allowed to use a camera. technically speaking, in wilderness areas. So we saw that used as a tool to try to preserve a lot of those lands. But as you know, that means you can't do any sort of active management for wildlife habitat,
Yeah.
for access, for hunters, for everyone else. All types of recreation are banned from that as well. So it's a real problem, and that's why I'm a big fan of conservation versus preservation.
So basically, it's a preservation is, this is a preserve. Look how beautiful it is. No, no, don't go in there. It's,
Exactly.
you could look at it. It's beautiful. Let's keep it like that. Where
Yeah.
conservation, you're actively using the land, you're cultivating the land. Um, and you're still preserving it, but you're actively using it as it
Right.
was
And
meant to be.
the thing that's so interesting about, quote, preservation to me is that we all know, and especially hunters, you know that if you go back to a hunting area year after year, it changes.
Yeah.
Nature is changing, it's not static. So the idea that you're able to preserve something in a moment in time just doesn't exist in Mother Nature. Mother Nature's always changing. So it's kind of this ridiculous, human idea.
Playing God.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, as far as international hunting bans and restrictions, um, how does that impact us um, here in the US as opposed to like a global ban?
hmm Um, I think that, and I used to do some of this international work actually when I worked for the National Rifle Association. And so we talk about the international hunting issues. The problem is, and this is kind of what you see in California and New York,
Yeah.
honestly. So you're well aware of this. As soon as an idea happens, maybe in Europe, and Europe tries to ban hunting in Africa, for example, which the European Union has. Great Britain tried to do it as well. What you see happening then is far less money for conservation in Africa. Hunters hear that there might not be hunting. They're not sure if they go that they'll be able to bring their legally harvested, wildlife home. As you know, that also means that it's years of planning one of those trips too.
Yeah.
So maybe that money just dries up. The concern is that whatever happens there in that fight then comes to the US eventually, which we have already seen. So we don't want to be fighting on all fronts. So that's why it's important and in Great Britain, it was such a big deal to defeat that ban a couple of times because it really meant no, this is not right. We had a lot of wildlife biologists who are not hunters who came out and said this will be to the detriment of numerous species that are endangered in
Mhm.
Africa. That was all a good thing. And I mean, these people, as you can imagine, they faced a lot of criticism, death threats, all of those things. But by that happening, it really showed that there is a way to manage wildlife, even endangered wildlife, and hunt them, and then provide a ton of money for conservation for the betterment of those species. So that's why I think it's so important. Whatever happens internationally will eventually happen in the United States. So we have to pay attention to all of it.
Well, I think like the elephant is a good example of that.
Mhm.
Here we're up in arms about, hunting an elephant, but there in Africa, they hear somebody has a permit, it's like ringing the dinner bell,
Yeah,
you know?
absolutely. Yes. Yeah, the amount of meat that is donated to rural villages that have no other way of getting protein, basically. If you look at the countries where elephants are hunted, they have the highest populations of elephants. I mean, we know that as hunters, but a lot of people don't understand that. If
Yeah,
you look at Kenya, I mean, since they banned hunting, a 69% decrease in wildlife in Kenya. That is not a success story. And
yeah.
everybody brags about the fact that they banned hunting and they have nothing to show for it. They've decimated their wildlife. So I think that's important. the other thing are managed game areas. You know, not every place in Africa can be a photographic tourist safari,
Yeah.
right? Just like not every place in the United States can be like that either. So where it works, that's great, but there's a lot of other area where animals need to have habitat, and having 200,000 acres, you know, as a game conservation area where there's hunting pays for everything, for the anti-poaching
It
units,
does.
for, you know, health clinics, for feeding the rural people that live there, all of those things. It's a huge success story.
Well, the hunting licenses and things of that nature, like I said, it does pay for the anti-poaching uh, groups that have been pretty successful,
Yeah.
you know.
Yes, a lot of them have been. Yeah, absolutely.
But like when you're hunting elephant in Africa, when they hear a shot, hundreds of people come from everywhere
Yes.
and they butcher that thing on the spot, and there's nothing left but a bloodstain when they're done. They
Yeah.
take
Yeah.
everything, the skin, the meat, the bones. They use it all. Nothing goes to waste.
Hmm. Absolutely. And that's something that we don't talk enough about either.
That's a fact. That is true. So what's next on the calendar for us? What can we expect from DSC?
We're pretty excited about a lot of things going on in Congress right now. So hopefully we'll get some Endangered Species Act reform. DSC is a big supporter of that bill and a couple of others that have been introduced. That would be incredible. It would actually help us recover species and then get them off the list, which would be a huge win, especially in the lower 48. And quite honestly, you know, why our Fish and Wildlife Service is listing species that we have no control over, like species in Africa and elsewhere, really doesn't make a lot of sense. We don't have control over the regulatory mechanisms there. We have control over none of the habitat there.
Yeah.
So it seems like a lot of wasted resources for us to be focusing on that rather than focusing on domestic species that truly need help. So that's something we're looking at, working with the Department of the Interior to make the permit process work finally, so that if you go abroad and you want to bring your legally harvested wildlife home, it doesn't take years and years before you get your permit approved. So those are a lot of the things that we're looking forward to working on.
Okay. Well, if we want to donate, where do we go?
Go to, if you want to donate to the PAC, it's dscpac.com or .org.
Okay.
And that, or DSC and then the PAC website. So
Okay.
let
I'll put it on the I'll put it up
me,
when I post this.
let
But
me look it up real quick, actually. And now my internet wants to be slow, of course.
um, well, the DSC site is biggame.org,
Yes,
and they can get there through the DSC site.
biggame.org, and then it's slash, I think, PAC.
Okay. Well, I'll
If
find
you
it.
go to DSC, you can click the donate button too. So
Okay. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to speak to us today, and we look forward to seeing you at the next show.
you bet, anytime. And if anybody ever has questions or concerns, please feel free to reach out to me. It's Erica@biggame.org.
Okay. Thanks again.
You bet. Thank you.